Hi everyone, welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. We have lots of good stuff to talk about again this week. Depending on who you believe, Wisconsin is either doing great when it comes to job creation or we're losing more jobs than any state in the country. We'll talk about the latest battle between Scott Walker and Tom Barrett. And believe it or not, Milwaukee Public Schools are actually improving pretty dramatically when it comes to the number of kids that are graduating from high school. We'll talk about the work that remains to be done. And we'll talk about whether millions of dollars, both public and private money, should be used to fix up Milwaukee's aging War Memorial and Art Center buildings down in the lakefront. All right, let me introduce everybody. We have longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally. You know Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. Angela Dressen, a leadership development executive in Milwaukee. And Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is the race for governor. New polls out show that Scott Walker has a 5 or 6 point lead over Tom Barrett with less than 3 weeks until Election Day. The battle this week focused on whether Wisconsin was gaining jobs or losing jobs under Walker's leadership. Sort of depends on which survey you want to believe. In the next 18 days, do you see Barrett, Gerard, closing the gap or not?
Well, I think the race is going to hinge on turnout for starters, and that it's a lot closer than even those 5 or 6 points. There are very few undecideds, and whoever has the best ground game, and I've been saying this ad infinitum, whoever has the best ground game will pull it out. I think Walker's advantage when it comes to a ground game is that he moved his chief of staff, Keith Gilkes, back to managing the campaign shortly after there were inklings that a recall would be effective. And that, I think, is going to be his best advantage. Now he's got an enthusiastic party machinery behind him. The polls are energizing a lot of his supporters. Those that do support him, his number's been hanging around 47%. 47%. So I think that's really where the test is going to be with turnout. Now, with the dust-up that they've had over these numbers, Walker's relying on survey numbers that come out typically the middle of the year. In this case, it would have come out June 28th. They're favorable numbers. Economists are saying that they're more reliable numbers. They are numbers that, frankly, if I were in his shoes, I'd put them out there too, even though they came out earlier than what they typically would be released, because they don't show the truly dire circumstance for the state that the Barrett campaign was hoping they'd be able to capitalize on or be able to continue to say. It is still dire, and this is the piece that is most troubling. It's still dire in some communities like the central city of Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, Janesville, Beloit.
Angela, you know, they say that the turnout is going to determine this race and it's going to be huge, but you hear people every single day saying, I am so sick of this political stuff, I can't wait till it's over. Do you think that's going to hold turnout down maybe? People just don't want to take part in it anymore?
Yeah, I think there's a lot riding on this election, so I do think voters will be mobilized. I do think they'll hit the polls. You know, I think it's showing up in both money. I think it showed up in just the numbers of people who supported the recall. You know, so I think people will move and will get to the polls. I think it's interesting to look at, and just looking at how close the race is. You know, Walker has already spent $30 million and has exponentially outspent Barrett, yet he's yet to clear 50% in the polls, in the surveys that have been done. So he really hasn't gotten that much of a lead. As Gerard said, it's very close. So I'm curious what will happen. I'm a little concerned just that the Republicans have made a very strong commitment in terms of dollars. You know, Priebus is saying, you know, we are all in here. I mean, he's making very focused comments. And the Democrats are saying, well, we may show up for a fundraiser. So the funding of it concerns me, but I do think we'll have voters showing up at the polls.
Kevin, do you think the Democrats are going to all of a sudden in the next few days, boom, pump all this money into it and bring in the big names like a Biden or an Obama or a Bill Clinton?
Well, if they don't, then I think Barrett's done. I think both sides are indeed energized and motivated, but the Marquette poll this week was very revealing. There is an intensity gap between the Republicans and the Democrats. 91% of Republicans in that poll said that they are definitely going to go out and vote, as opposed to 83% of Democrats who said that they would go out and vote. Republicans have been waiting a long time while this year-plus long temper tantrum has been going on. And they have the momentum, and Walker's been planning for it, as you mentioned, for a long, long time when he made that strategic move within his campaign, which has set up 23 victory centers all across the state that have made 2 million calls to voters since January. Right. And the momentum is there. A month ago, it was razor thin, the margin. In fact, it was a veritable tie. Now, Walker has a 5 to 6 point advantage, even a 9-point advantage in one poll. The economy has turned around. Sure, it depends what numbers you want to look at. Walker opponents will look at one set. Walker proponents will look at another set of numbers. But you have unemployment rate down in Wisconsin. Number of unemployment compensation claims down in Wisconsin. Tax revenues on the increase to the point where we now have a state surplus. Those components can't transpire if you have major job loss. So I believe the economy is headed in the right direction. I think most voters understand that.
I read an interview today with former Congressman David Obey, and he was saying, Barrett can win this thing. Barrett can win this thing, but the party has got to get on his side, and they have to do it quickly.
Well,
do you agree?
Sure they do, and they will. Scott Walker's magic. He just had a huge deficit just a month ago, and now he's got a surplus, Kevin says. He just had the worst job numbers in the country, the absolute worst job record in the country, until a couple days ago when he released his own numbers that say, no, I don't have the worst job record. Well, actually, the numbers don't say that, because he released numbers that no other state in the union has released. They're unverified, these numbers. The federal government hasn't verified them and said they're true. And for all we know, all 49 other states could release better numbers than the records say, and we could still be the worst in the nation. The voters in Wisconsin are not as dumb as apparently Scott Walker and his supporters believe they are. And I've said for a long time, this isn't between left and right. This is between honest and dishonest. And when you have more bad job numbers coming out this week, and so a couple days ahead of time, you release some made-up numbers that nobody can compare to any other state in the union.
Actually, a liberal professor at UW who's a donor to Tom Barrett, Rachofsky.
Yeah, the numbers aren't made up.
He said they're primo.
Numbers,
he said they're very accurate and more reliable than the other states.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics will correct those numbers before they're ever released.
The likelihood that the Bureau of Labor Statistics will correct those numbers is less likely than correcting the numbers that were released yesterday. Those are the numbers that are the least reliable.
This is the whole reason Walker's doing this, putting out a bunch of confusing numbers that say opposite of what everybody knows, is that every month when job numbers come out, Wisconsin is showing to be the worst in the country.
And those are the numbers that are corrected. Those are the numbers that are corrected.
You can't tell people in this state who don't have jobs and haven't had jobs for the last year and a half that, guess what, you've got jobs. Scott Walker is actually doing a great job for you. It is fraudulent and it's dishonest, and I think he's going to get a big backlash against dishonesty.
All right, next topic. A decade ago, Milwaukee Public Schools had a dismal high school graduation rate, just over 50%. 1 out of every 2 kids did not graduate from high school. Figures released this week show that has jumped to almost 70%, actually 63% if you count only the kids that are able to do it in 4 years flat. An improvement for sure, but is it anything, Angela, to brag about when 30 or 40% of your kids still aren't graduating in 4 years? Do you say, oh, this is great, but...
Well, I think it's important to recognize the progress that has been made. I mean, we've been focusing on the graduation rates for a number of years now, so I think we should expect to see an uptick, which is a positive thing. But this is certainly no time to let up effort. I mean, we still need to keep a strong intention on focusing on that so we make sure kids are served well and that they are graduating, they are being educated as they need to be. Because obviously with those numbers, there are still a lot of children who are not being served well. But I do think we can look to the numbers and say, okay, we are headed in a positive direction, which is very good.
Kevin, why are the numbers going up? Are MPS teachers and administrators all of a sudden doing a much better job?
I honestly don't know. I really don't know. But whatever they're doing, they need to be doing more of it. And sit down and look at what's working. For example, just within the last week or two, a national rating, annual national rating, I think U.S. News and World Report, said that Ronald Reagan and Rufus King high schools were two of the best high schools, not in the state, but in the entire country. So let's model the rest of MPS after what they're doing. It's very commendable for MPS and also the entire state, where graduation rates are up and across all categories. Poor kids, socially disadvantaged, races, kids who aren't English proficient. In all those areas, the graduation rates have improved, but we have to be honest here and say that it's still not acceptable when 4 out of 10 kids are not graduating. That means that their chances of doing well out on the street and in the job market are not very good.
Are things going well because your buddy, Dr. Thornton, is a great superintendent? Is that part of it?
I think he's a great superintendent, but 2 years on the job, that's certainly not enough to tell whether he's had the impact on these most previously released scores or rates. I think, though, that the community has made a concerted effort to come together and address some of those socioeconomic issues that prevent kids from going to school and staying in school once they get there, and attendance is the driver behind graduation rates. So if the kids are going, and they're going consistently, and they're getting the level of academic achievement
if they show up,
they
they
need,
traditionally do well.
They do well, and that's what teachers will say repeatedly. If you come to class, we can help you learn.
Maybe that's it.
And so that's where the focus has been, on improving attendance. There has been a community-wide effort to make attendance a top priority, and it seems to be working.
MPS teachers get beat up a lot.
Oh, really?
Suddenly,
Yes.
Suddenly do we say, well, they must be doing a pretty darn good job?
Well, I think Gregory Thornton does get credit. I think Michael Bonds and the school board gets credit. This is the first consistently engaged school board with what matters in the classroom that we've had for decades. We remember all those school boards of the past who were at war with each other. Some of them didn't even represent public schools. They ran their own private schools, and they could care less about public education. And it was some kind of ideological war between the MMAC and the teachers union. And instead, this school board is focusing on what really does matter. And so is this superintendent. And they hired this superintendent. You remember what they went through to hire this superintendent. There was people who wanted to blow up the entire district, right. and this school board, which was focused on what it wanted to do, practically got the school system taken away from it by the governor and by the mayor in Milwaukee. And instead, they've kept their focus on what it needs to be on. Unfortunately, I hate to think that this now will be stifled by these enormous education cuts in the state of Wisconsin. I think that is one of the worst developments in the history of this state ever. That our focus should be on higher education and on secondary education, and for the politicians to pull the rug out from under MPS at a time when it is consistently improving. It isn't going to happen overnight, and no, we can't expect that suddenly we're going to have soaring graduation rates from children living in poverty that need a lot of services, but we're certainly moving in the right direction.
And how about giving some credit where credit is due, and no one's mentioned that here yet? How about the kids themselves?
Right.
They're showing up, they're doing well, they're graduating. If anybody gets the credit, I think the kids do.
Well, Angela, when there's so much poverty in this community, is it fair to compare Milwaukee to the rest of the state? Is Milwaukee ever going to be at 80%, 85, 90% graduation rate, or is that just a pipe dream?
I'd like to set the bar high. I think we have a lot of challenges, but I don't think we should sell ourselves short. I just think we need to really dig in and work through those challenges. Yes, I think we have kind of a tougher road than many other districts, but I think I don't think we should lessen our standards or lessen our expectations.
I think one of the things that Joel mentioned that bears repeating, Bonds, through his leadership of the school board, and Thornton, through his leadership of the administration, have put a structure in place that will ensure that we're not going to regress. If anything, I think you're going to see improved graduation rates going forward because of the stability that they brought and clearer focus to what needs to take place in order to see those kids improve academically and improve in terms of graduation and access to college.
Should Walker get any credit at all for the improvements in MPS?
Well, let's put it this way. Last week on the program, Joel said that that the governor has destroyed public education.
He's trying.
I don't see that. I don't see school buildings crumbling and schools being shut down.
$1 billion out of education.
If anything,
Read to lead.
The tools that he set up are working if school districts took advantage of them. The few that didn't, like Milwaukee and Kenosha and some others, they are struggling and had to lay off people and are having trouble with their budgets now. But I believe that the governor gets some credit because all his critics said, well, I mean, we're going to go to hell in a handbasket education-wise. That hasn't happened. If anything, this week's report shows that we have massive improvement all across the state in all kinds of categories of students.
All right. Next topic. Let's talk about the War Memorial Art Center in Milwaukee's downtown, right at the end of Wisconsin Avenue. The Art Center unveiled plans this week to raise $15 million in private money to do a much-needed repair and remodeling job, so it looks nicer sitting next to the fancy Calatrava addition. The county will still be asked to kick in a few $1 million probably, seeing as how it owns the building. Catch is, the Art Center doesn't want to keep answering to the War Memorial veterans groups that act as the landlord. So, do you give the Art Center more autonomy, or do you have to remember first and foremost that this was a building built as a memorial to veterans, not to artists?
Well, that's how it got built, but it has always seemed bizarre to me. A friend of mine who's an artist, when he moved to this city, saw that magnificent War Memorial on the lakefront. I mean, it is a cool architectural building. Even before the Calatrava was built, we had a landmark on the lake, and he went into it looking for the art museum, and could not believe he had to go to the basement to find the art. Because he thought that was the whole point of it, and it should be the point of it. You can honor veterans through a magnificent facility on the lakefront that houses what is now a magnificent art collection. It certainly makes sense to do away with the dual kind of management that has existed and really has allowed the Veterans Center part of it to deteriorate to a shocking degree. The Arts Center itself doesn't want that kind of facility for its art. Its art is in fact threatened by some of the damage and the deterioration of that building. It makes sense to put it under one management. That is a great honor for the veterans to house this magnificent collection with this beautiful modern architecture on one end and the War Memorial on the other. It's getting straightened out. Both the veterans and art can collect an enormous amount of private money. They are much more successful in raising private money than many other services in this community. And I have no doubt that they'll do a magnificent job of fundraising for this, just like they did to build the college.
Angela, nobody ever says, hey, let's go down to the War Memorial Veterans Center. They always say, let's go down to the Arts Center. Is it important not to forget that it really is a memorial to veterans, not an art center?
I do think that's important. I think that absolutely should be retained, but I have to agree with Joel. I think after years of deferred maintenance with considerable assets at risk, I do think that there should be a change in the management of the structure. And with the Milwaukee Art Museum already occupying 70% of the space, I think it makes sense. I think they have a strong plan. They certainly have a lot at stake, and I really see that they would do this well.
Would it make sense to move the veterans organization somewhere else?
This isn't a real fight between the veterans and the art museum. This is a fight between the county, who actually owns that building, and all the other interested parties. The county's contribution has dropped significantly. The building is in need of severe retrofitting, and the opportunity to raise money for it has set up a contest between who's going to be responsible for this facility if the money is raised. The veterans are getting older, especially World War II veterans are fewer in number, less active than they had been. A lot of the facilities that they used to own, like Cudworth Post down on the lakefront, has gone. They've sold it. They've moved into smaller quarters. That's a reflection of their reduced numbers from World War II and the not as active numbers of Vietnam vets and the successive wars that have come through. But Joel's right, you can raise a lot of money on the support of veterans. The belief that I have is that both those groups, the Arts Museum and their corporate supporters, as well as the grassroots supporters that veterans tend to have, should come together and do what's needed to be done in order to build a new facility or rebuild that facility, and then look to the county for some adjustment in who the owner of the facility is going to be. Because all of the other partners in the War Memorial complex, they are starting to look for ways to become more independent. The Marcus Center is looking at it. The Public Museum has explored ways, and they're not even a part of that group, but they have the same kind of rubric that governs them, that governs those other facilities.
Kevin, should the county cough up more cash, or is that never going to happen?
I think they should. I don't think they will.
No.
And I don't necessarily disagree with anything that's been said here. However, the veterans feel that there's been an end around here. And they have a history. Mm-hmm. We should have an undying gratitude to them. And we should, even though there is a viable plan that I think is workable, at least bring them to the table and let them have some input. You ask where should we put them somewhere else? Where else can they go? Well, you don't really want to kick them out, do you? But at least let them be part of the process while this is being negotiated.
All right. Okay, a few more thoughts now on the race for governor. When writing and editing consultant Rick Horowitz looks at the fight over Wisconsin's jobs number, he sees a recipe for confusion. And for certain people, Rick says, that's the whole point.
Hi there, and thanks for dropping in on the Scott Walker Information Liberation League. Here at SWIL, we've got some of the GOP's top number crunchers and massage therapists working overtime, all of them dedicated to giving you, the voters, Wisconsin's most positive jobs data. It's the kind of story you never hear from the mainstream media. They're just so negative all the time, so mathematical. Here at SWIL, we do things differently. First, you need the right ingredients. If you're doing jobs reports, you need jobs numbers, right? So here they are. Now, we take these job numbers, not all of them, mind you. We take them and we cut some of them out. Here's a 6, here's an 8. Let's put the 8 in front of the 6. Okay, it looks better that way. And we just smush them up, push them up until we get a number that looks really good. And numbers from when? From whenever makes the governor look real good. So we take calendars. It could be a month from over here and another couple of months from back here. And, you know, just jam them in there. And maybe even a month that hasn't been officially released yet. Now, some folks call that cherry picking, but we call it smart politics. Yeah. Okay. What else? Well, we always add plenty of seasoning at SWIL. Take this jobs graph, for instance. Right now, it looks pretty terrible, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. But what if we turn it this way instead? Hot, 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 right? So there we go. And what's a cup of numbers and a pinch of graph without a pint of smoke and mirrors? So let's add some liquid smoke, okay? Just like this, plenty of liquid smoke going in there. Drip it in nice and good. Yeah, okay, good. Of course, liquid mirrors aren't in season yet, but we've got the next best thing. We've got some liquid amnesia. That's right, a can of Old Milwaukee, or as we like to call it, Scold Milwaukee. Should do nicely. Pour that in there. Good. Get a nice head up there. Good. And finally, because here at SWIL, we always ask ourselves, what would the Koch brothers do? Let's add some Coke. Coke Zero, right here, and Coke lots of zeros. Because when you think Koch brothers, you think lots of zeros, right? Far right. Absolutely. So let's do that over there, and here, over here. Okay, and we're just about ready to go. We ready for that? Okay, here we go. Turn it on and see what we get. Con, Wisconsin, Con, Wisconsin, yum, 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 yum. All right, we're ready. Okay, here's Snooker and you, kid.
You know, Rick is always excited that he gets the last say, but there are 30 seconds left.
Walker wins.
Yeah, and that's not exactly how they crunch the numbers, and I think even Rick knows that. But I give him an A for effort.
All right. Well, thanks anyway, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of what looks to be a beautiful weekend.